All right, thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jonathan Covey. I'm the Policy Director for Texas Values, along with my colleague Mary Elizabeth Castle, Director of Government Relations, and the President of Texas Values, Jonathan Saenz. The court just wrapped up just a few minutes ago to hearing questions of one of the most critical hot-button issues dealt with by culture today. And let me be clear about this. This case and this law, Senate Bill 14, is about protecting children. The legislature understood when it passed in the last legislative session that these harmful interventions are based on junk science and are not constitutional. SB 14 always has been about preventing the castration, preventing the sterilization and the harm to small, vulnerable children. Now, Texas Values submitted an amicus brief in this case, and we were honored in that brief and supported every step of the way by our nationwide organization, Family Policy Alliance, who has fought alongside of us on this issue on the national level with great success. So a couple things about this issue. Over 20 states have passed legislation similar to SB 14, unequivocally recognizing that children deserve to be protected. And the Attorney General's office made a strong case today that SB 14 should be upheld and that the TRO that was imposed by the lower court should be reversed and overturned. So we heard a number of persuasive arguments by the state, one including that the government mandating medical records on the one hand and government prohibiting individuals from voluntarily doing certain very risky, harmful procedures on the other hand are two very different propositions deserving two very different levels of protection. Another was that the law frequently differentiates between minors and adults. We also found that this was not part of the case, but as we had the implementation of SB 14, that Dell Children's Hospital, a number of other children's hospitals in Texas, Texas Children's Hospital, were doing these types of interventions and medical procedures, and they were shut down by the passage of Senate Bill 14. So we also had Chloe Cole, who was a young lady who detransitioned from these harmful interventions and who has spoken out many times nationwide across the nation, and who also spoke out here at the Texas legislature in favor of SB 14, and many others, including Walt Heyer, Prisha Mosley, a number of others as well, who showed that these interventions are harmful for children and they lead down a path of lifelong harm and regret. And then finally, we know that health care, as it's traditionally understood, is to restore the human body to its original condition. But this is different in that this is taking a healthy body and harming a healthy body and causing harm going forward in the future and down the road. So the bottom line is that when you impose cross-gender affirmative efforts as a sole response to gender dysphoric children, what you do is you blatantly ignore the data that's in front of you, and you do so despite a showing that a vast number of children, 85 to 95% of children, will naturally resolve their biological sex when they reach adulthood. And if you're ignoring the data, and if you are trying to medically resolve a problem that 80 to 90% of the time will resolve itself, let's be clear, let's call it what it is. This is child abuse. And this is something that we are here to protect kids from here in the state of Texas. And at Texas Values, we will continue to work towards protecting kids, even in the coming session, in the courts, in the legislature. And so I want to introduce to you the president of our organization, President Jonathan Saenz, give him the opportunity to say a few words as well. But I want to thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Jonathan Saenz, and I serve as president and attorney for Texas Values, the attorney on the legal brief that Texas Values submitted before the Texas Supreme Court, protecting and supporting Senate Bill 14 alongside our friends at Family Policy Alliance. And this is not an issue that's new for the courts or for state legislatures. The cycle and the movement, the momentum, and the direction is the country through state legislatures, through their elected people, through the people and parents saying that these type of procedures are harmful and dangerous to kids. And the only way that we can stop them is to have something in state law that makes it clear they're no longer appropriate to be offered. I think over 20 states now have laws like this. You can go to the website Help Not Harm to see a list of those states, and those are growing. Just a day or so ago, last week, I think we had a state legislature that overrode a veto. I believe either Kentucky or some of the states on the east side of the country that continue to move in this direction. Arkansas overrode the veto. The people through their elected representatives are sending a strong message. We don't want our kids harmed by these procedures. And we heard it in the court today. We heard the Attorney General's office make the point that folks that are pushing these issues, even if they say they're in the so-called medical community, have been hijacked by political interest. Right? That is what is driving this issue. Medicine is no longer driving this issue when it comes to these transition procedures. And we think about what's happening. Body parts are being removed. The testimony that we heard in the court today talked about 8 and 9-year-old kids that are being sterilized irreversibly at such a young age. And so this is why our state is in a position of saying we have to protect kids. We don't allow kids to do things like smoke cigarettes. We don't allow them to be involved in tanning beds and alcohol. We saw that talked about today. There is a number of things that we have a history of doing and saying there are limitations to what kids can do, and also there are limitations to what we're going to allow some people in the medical community to do. When this issue was taken before the legislature, there was robust testimony in the Senate and the House. And there was robust testimony from people supporting Senate Bill 14 saying that these procedures should not be performed on kids that were from the medical community. All right? People in the medical community strongly support Senate Bill 14, including the two authors of these bills. Representative Tom Oliverson is a physician himself. He is an anesthesiologist. Dr. Donna Campbell, who is the Senate author, is a medical doctor herself. She is a emergency room doctor. Time and again. And what we also heard was that there is a hypocrisy going on by some. If you want to transition, they'll give you insurance coverage. They'll give you all the support. But if you say, I don't think this is a good idea, like Chloe Cole said, all of a sudden you're abandoned. We're no longer talking about what is best for kids in these circumstances. When these procedures are allowed, it's become a political movement, and that's why the legislature said it's time to step in and protect kids, and that's what Senate Bill 14 does. We believe very strongly that the Supreme Court is going to rule the right way on this issue. The law currently is in effect. And if we see hospitals like Texas Children's, we're going to have a radio show with a very special guest this Thursday, where we're going to be talking about a whistleblower. We're talking about Texas Children's Hospital, who it was alleged in the past said these things aren't going on. Now we're finding out there's evidence suggesting the opposite. That is because people have spoken, elected officials have spoken, and stood firm on these issues. The more that we stand firm, we're starting to find out more about actually what the details are and what the facts are about these issues. And the more that we peel those layers, we're finding that kids are getting harmed and they're crying for help. Giving the option of cutting up your body and becoming sterile or committing suicide is an absurd option to be presenting to kids, but that's what the left and the people that are pushing these ideology issues want to present to kids. Those are false options. There are plenty of people that are looking to help, whether it's through mental health services, counseling, psychology, psychiatry. You don't have to cut up your body. You don't have to sterilize yourself to deal with gender dysphoria. And that concludes our comments. We're happy to take any questions.
Can I ask, you mentioned there's a whistleblower that you're going to have on your radio show?
That's right.
Can you tell us more details about that?
Yeah, if you go to our website, txvalues.org, we have a weekly radio show and program and podcast called the Texas Values Report. That guest is going to be on this Thursday.
And so you're alleging that whistleblower is saying that these gender-affirming care was being provided post Senate Bill 14 being enforced.
What we're saying is this individual has information about this issue related to Texas Children's that we're going to be talking about in our radio program that is relevant to this issue in this case. Well, the court's tradition is that they're going to end their cycle by June. They'll make all their decisions by then. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see a decision before then, because I think this is pretty much an easy case. There are a lot of procedural issues going on that the folks that are trying to push this ideology and these harmful procedures did not even meet some procedural requirements. So I think you heard that talked about. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the court step in very quickly, because they want people across the state to know that it's important for us to protect kids in Texas.
These are all very, very personal, individualized decisions between kids and their parents. Why should the court step in the middle of that?
Well, look, there's a lot of areas that I mentioned in statute where certain things are not appropriate for children, and that's what this revolves around. We've decided that they're harmful for children. And look, when we heard all this testimony, page after page of people testifying at the legislature, talking about the harm that's come from them. If you've heard Chloe Cole tell her story, some of the things that have happened to her are irreversible. At 12, she started a transition procedure and then realized it was not a good idea, but there were some things that already happened to her that she could not change. And so I think that's where it's important, and that's what our legislature has said. We had a very robust process. We had bipartisan support that said there are some things that are harmful to kids that should not be a part of these decisions and a part of the things that are offered to them, and suggest that there's not a harm. And so the harm has become too great, the information has become too strong, and the evidence has become too clear that kids get hurt when they go through these puberty blockers and some of these other procedures that result in sterilization and many times irreversible effects.
Kind of a similar follow-up question to that. I think the dynamic was so interesting watching out in court. Traditionally, the conservative party is the one that fights for parents' rights. In this case, it was talking about taking away the right of the parent, and the more progressive organization was arguing for making sure parents had that right. How do you reconcile that argument of, yes, we are the one that stands usually with parents' rights, but in this circumstance, we think that parents should not have this right?
Well, I think the arguments were made very clear. There are certain procedures and certain things that some people want to do to kids that are too harmful. And so that's really what the issue is about. And so I think you could find common ground in a lot of ways. Democrats and Republicans agree that when you put kids through these procedures, kids get hurt. And kids end up with irreversible damage that many times later they decide, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just waited. 90% of kids that say they have gender dysphoria and some of those issues, they end up growing out of it later, and they decide, hey, I want to continue to say the sex that I was born. And so that's really what's going on here, is the issue is about some things are so harmful and dangerous to kids that we've decided that we shouldn't step back and not protect them. And I think that's common ground we should be able to agree on.
What's Texas's values position on a ban like that? Would it be constitutional? Would you support it? Do you want the legislature to take it up next session?
Well, we're going to focus today on what's going on with this court case. And I think, and the fact that you asked that question, though, I think in some ways suggests that we probably can agree when it comes to kids, this shouldn't be right. When it comes to adults, maybe that's another question, right? That's, I think, a thought that a lot of people have. And I think that's healthy for people to see. Sometimes it's different in certain circumstances for kids. The state has a duty to protect them. And I hope that's why the Texas Supreme Court, I believe, will come to the right decision and say in this circumstance, they went through the process, there was robust debate and conversation on both sides, and the evidence has become clear that these procedures are harmful to kids, and particularly legally in this case, that the other side has not made a convincing enough case that they should be able to challenge state law. State law, Senate Bill 14, is currently in place. You can go to our website, txvalues.org, find out more about what that law is. And if you hear about people that are violating that law, that are trying to get away with it, and you have information to share and expose that, we ask you to share it with us and send an email to info@txvalues.org. Last question.
An age limit or an age where people can make that decision without the court stepping in?
What I think is right now, it's very clear that kids are getting hurt, that we're allowing it to happen. A lot was talked about whether there's a line. I think if you look at what the other side is saying, I don't think there is a line for them. There was a question asked about whether or not, what if you had a situation of assisted suicide? And they couldn't even answer affirmatively, oh, that would be different. We wouldn't allow for assisted suicide for a kid. gave some response about some legal precedent or, concept of strict scrutiny. They couldn't even answer, that we wouldn't support kids, being killed by adults with euthanasia or those type of things. And so I don't think for some people on the left there is a line, and that's concerning. But I do think a lot of people throughout the country, and we see this, Republicans and Democrats are coming together on this issue, not only in Texas, but in other state legislatures and online, and saying this is not a good idea. We know more now than we knew before, and we know enough to say we need to stop these things. We need to push pause on them. That's why 20 plus states are passing laws just like Texas, and the momentum and the direction is going to more states doing that. So thank you all for being here today. Really appreciate you. God bless.
Thank you.